So firstly, a very warm welcome to everybody today for this webinar. Askia is by the industry for the industry, and I think one of the really important parts of the awards program is to share and showcase and highlight what's working well. And we're very privileged today to have last year's Judges Award winning entry in SA Harvest. And welcome, Ozzy. He's our CEO of SA Harvest. Welcome. And then, of course, Gary, our chairman of the Askia Judging Committee, I think amongst many hats. Welcome, Gary. So a few housekeeping rules just before we start. As I mentioned, please make sure your microphones are switched off, and we'll have an open questions and answer session a little bit later. And just awards are open for 2026. If you pop onto our website, you'll see where the entry forms are. And I encourage you, if you have a great story to tell or something you'd like to share with the market, please enter. Entries, deadline for entries is the end of April. And we're really looking forward to seeing what this year's awards highlights and showcases. As you'll see, this is our fifth year, our fifth anniversary awards year, so it's very special to all of us. It started off as a passion project, and it's really grown, and we're really excited about this moving forward. Before we start, Gary, is there a few welcoming words you'd like to say?
Well, yeah, thanks, Liesl, and welcome to everybody. Really nice to have you here and to learn about, this profession of ours, and we can all learn something from these kind of events. I can tell you, as a judge, and having been a judge for the last maybe, 16 years or so, and having seen hundreds and hundreds of entries. Every single entry is for me a learning experience, and it's why I do it. I just love listening to these stories, and so I hope, and certainly, Ozzy's a very eloquent speaker, so I hope that today you can also take something from this and hopefully apply it into your own professional lives. But so thanks again, everybody, for attending and for sharing. Good luck. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gary. So, Ozzy, I guess spotlight on you. So I'd really like you to share with the audience a little bit about SA Harvest and some key points about the entry, the award-winning entry for SA Harvest.
Perfect, Lisa. I'm going to say thank you to you and Gary and the Askia team for this opportunity. I think for us as SA Harvest, it's been absolutely incredible to form part of this incredible network of like-minded people that are really doing very important work in the supply chain. And yeah, huge privilege for us. And just a little bit about SA Harvest. A lot of people think of us as a food rescue organization or just an NGO, but we like to think of ourselves as a smart supply chain solution to a very big problem in South Africa. Just to give you guys a couple of stats, at the moment, more or less 19 million South Africans don't know where their next meal is going to come from. 3.5 million of that being kids. And on top of that, we know that 1 in every 3 kids in South Africa are born with serious signs of stunting because of a lack of malnutrition. So for us as SA Harvest, it was important to build a smart supply chain solution that will be able to work with large-scale manufacturers and farmers and retailers and redirect their excess stock. This is stock that does not sell, and redirect it into community-based organizations. We believe from the beginning, the problem is much bigger than one organization, and that's why we believe in working with large-scale supply chain specialists. We managed to, through the incredible Road Freight Association of South Africa, get involved with the larger supply chain guys like Vector and Unitrans and a couple of other guys. And the solution we've really built was to enable for stock to be moved on what we call return legs at scale. We realized very early in the game that, for this really to work, we're going to need a huge collective. And we needed industry experts that could help us build that solution. And that's really what we did. Other side of the point was, which was extremely important, is we mentioned that we work with community-based organizations. We see these organizations as part of the supply chain. So it's very important for us to have deep-rooted relationships on the ground in these marginalized communities and make them part of the entire supply chain solution. And all of it is then backed up through data, a tech platform that we've built, and then, of course, an incredible team of like-minded people that have had so many conversations on the ground in the supply chain to really understand how do we solve, how do we disrupt, but how do we build an inclusive ecosystem with all of the different stakeholders in the supply chain? Because that is what is needed to solve the problem, the size of what we're tackling.
I mean, Ozzy, you raise a very valid point. Humanitarian supply chains are really complex, right? I mean, there's so many moving parts, there's no regularity, I think, and there's this big need. So how have you guys managed to factor in all these kind of, I'd say, curveballs, I guess, in this space?
Look, I mean, the short answer would be it's relationship driven and really having understanding. I always say to the team, really go and listen, understand before you try and solve. So on the ground is very complex. You're dealing with a lot of young people that come from marginalized backgrounds that are psychologically stuck. So it was important for us to have the community-based leaders that have been doing this for years. They've literally been walking this path with these young people for years and enabling them in the supply chain. On the other side, and once again of the coin, what was important for us is that as a young company, we realized that, there's a lot that we don't understand about supply chain, and that's why we have to learn from the giants, a lot of them in this room as well. And that was really the secret, for our success so far.
And tell me, Ozzy, what is one of the key success factors you think for SA Harvest, other than, so you mentioned a lot about your collaboration and your partnerships on the ground. What are your other key success factors for you?
I would say it would be, I'm going to steal this from Gary, we're always learning, always be open to learning. For us, company culture is extremely important. We have a very high level of excellence in the company, but it's also about how we serve. So it's very important for us on how we serve each other, how we serve our stakeholders within the supply chain, how do we serve our food donors, and then, of course, to make sure that things are completely digitized and transparent. Data. It's so important.
Yeah, in this industry, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that impressed me about your entry was the reporting capability, because often you don't get visibility of the impact that you're making in that space. So could you share a little bit more about the reporting capability and how you guys manage that part of it?
Absolutely, but I'm also just going to plant a seed for our audience because I'm also cognizant there are potential entries. A guy that I really enjoy is a guy by the name of Simon Sinek. He's written a few books like Start with a Why, and there was a talk that he did on Start with a Why. It was a TED talk that people should watch. And I'm not going to give it away, but a big part of that was challenging the status quo and how things are done. So for us, it was important to really challenge the status quo. We looked at, where can we apply knowledge? Where can we apply data? What is needed? So we sat with various stakeholders, and I mean from the ground level, from community-based organizations to other logistics businesses to our food donors, and we understood, okay, what is really important for them? What sort of data and transparency would they need? Everything from aligning to your UN ESG goals to, weight to building out tech around how we actually measure the nutrient level of the food that we redistribute to organizations. And that sort of became the framework that we built. And of course, huge amount of change management, different languages in every part of the supply chain. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gary, let's weigh in a little bit from the judge's perspective. So what stood out most for you on this entry?
I wish I could say that there was one particular thing, because it was such a well-rounded entry, which is what I think we liked about it. I think the first thing is that we had to put behind us the issue of this was humanitarian entry, because that affects your emotions as a judge, and you kind of like it. So that was at the bottom of our list, but an important one at the end of the day. So but we had to look at this from a supply chain perspective. And it's a sort of reverse logistics entry, in the sense that the goods have already been delivered, and they're now going through another path. And so the complexity of that, I think, needs to be understood. You're now picking up from disparate suppliers, disparate product, disparate labeling, not the same every single day. And of course, they're dealing with foodstuffs, so which have expiry dates, and you cannot take chances with that. So it's an extremely complex supply chain. And I think the way that they went about it in terms of structuring the business correctly, structuring it with the right amount of tech to make it all happen, because you can't do something like this manually. It's just not possible on this scale. And and then looking at all of those aspects, the measurements that they put in place, they drove themselves. This is not like a bunch of do-gooders, or you might be, Aussie, I mean, but it wasn't like a bunch of do-gooders just trying to do their best. This was a bunch of professional supply chain practitioners that approached this in this way, and they obviously learned. I mean, if you read the background, just a few years ago, they had one truck. Now they're serving 100,000 people a day. And that's not just taking chicken from Woolworths and giving it to some kid. It's about preparing meals and delivering it in a state that it's still safe, it's nutritious, and all of those kind of elements that go into it. So the complexity here was one which I think was quite different to any other product-driven supply chain. So that was something that really stood out. But the way that they approached it, the way that they measured it, the way that they drove it, the things that they look at, the passion in the thing. And then, of course, it serves, as I say, at the bottom of the list, but last but not least, is the fact that this really does a lot of good to communities and to societies as a whole. That was the clincher. And as judges, as I mentioned just now, we see, I mean, this last year, where this particular entry was entered, we started out with some 90 odd entries. We whittled them down. We whittled them down very quickly, just going through a sort of a paper audit, looking at, are these really entries worthwhile? And we ended up with 65, I think it was, entries which needed to be adjudicated. They needed to be judges. They were worthy entries. And then we allocate judges to them, champion judges, and we start the process. And so on this particular one, or as us as judges, we see dozens, and over the years we see hundreds of entries. So we've got a really good perspective of an entry and what it consists of. And so a lot of the entries we get deal with elements of supply chain. They deal with, maybe they fixed a warehouse, or they fixed a part of a warehouse, or they fixed their transportation, or they built a new warehouse, they brought in a new IT system, created different models, whether it was twin systems or whatever. And they're really good. They really are excellent. We don't often see a sort of an end-to-end type of solution that actually takes it from source and right through to delivery to the final end. So this entry had that advantage. It ticked all of those kind of boxes. We also work off a score sheet. And so the score sheet will take into account elements that I've just mentioned, around about productivities and efficiencies and environmental issues and impact on the communities and on the people inside of the business. What did it do? And I think, Aussie, I'd like to hear more about, your the impact internally on your people, which I always believe on these entries, if the people that are entering really think about what this does for their people. It's a great internal marketing exercise. People have participated in this. It wasn't just Aussie making this happen. I know he played the key role, so I'm not trying to get around that. But Aussie was supported by a team, and all of those deserve some form of recognition. And doing something like this, where you're exposing yourself, I always talk about it's like opening your kimono, to strangers, because that's what we are. We've never met Aussie and his team before. And we're all kind of very experienced. I mean, if you take guys like Mike Johnson, who's on the call, I think he's been doing this for 30, close to 40 years. And I think he started, a long time ago. Martin Bailey, I've been doing it for 15 years. Leon has been doing it for more than 20 years. So we've seen hundreds of entries. And so we might be a little bit kind of skeptical by now. A little bit, we look at these things, say, okay, we've heard this all before. What we're looking for is what stands out. What is different? What makes this special? And we have categories, as you know. We have, different, I can't remember how many, Liesl, can you?
But there's quite a few.
About 11 or something, like different categories that we slot them into. And there's a winner on every category. And then at the end of the day, we sit as judges after having allocated and, gone through our scorecards, and then debating, and I must tell you, rigorously debating the entries, because we're very conscious of the fact that everybody wants to be a winner. And so there can only be one winner. And so we have a winner per category. And we're very, very conscious of we have to do our job correctly. I know that from time to time we will actually make mistakes, but generally speaking, we have a good feel for an entry. And at the end of the day, after allocating winners to each of those categories, we sit as a judges panel and we say, okay, guys, which one stood out? Which one do you like? And to start with, I think we know we on this particular entry, it came out very, very clearly. About 70% of the judges immediately said this one. There was another entry that we had, also a humanitarian entry, funny enough, in Mozambique. And we compared the two. We liked the two. And we debated and debated and debated. And eventually we all agreed this one was the one. This is the one that stood out for us. So out of 65 solid entries, this is the one that impressed us the most. And for all of those reasons I mentioned, from sort of end-to-end complexities, food stuff, deadline dates, the deadline times, 100,000 people a day, I can't remember what the numbers were. It was like 80 million meals delivered to date. And the professional supply chain approach to a humanitarian issue just impressed the heck out of us. So that's why this one for us ended up as a no-brainer.
And also, Gary, it's like a perfect example of circular supply chain as well, which is not something one sees often. And just picking up on your point, Ozzy, what has it meant for the team and for SA Harvest in terms of winning this award? How has it changed things for everyone?
Lisa, before I can answer that, I'm just going to take it one step back. I was listening to Gary's words, and I think one thing we realized, having gone through the Askia program with you guys, and spending time with you, spending time with Gary, spending time with Martin, we realized, there is so much experience and so much knowledge in this collective. And already for the team, it was like the ultimate peer review. To be very honest with you, we've built SA Harvest from the ground up. The team is family. Our culture is very important to us. When we started, I was driving trucks with the guys, while I was cooking in the warehouse myself. We started with humble beginnings, and we always said that a big part of our ethos was never to lose that. Because you're only as good as your people. At the end of the day, we can build all the most incredible systems and. If you look at this supply chain, the relationships are so important and how you acknowledge people. So it was really a proud moment for the entire team. I mean, on the night of the award, I'll tell you a funny story. I was clapping for the Judges' Choice Award until Kaz and Victor said to me, "Are you not listening? You actually have to go up." So yeah,
Oh, that's amazing.
we're usually proud and yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So what's next for SA Harvest?
Look, I think one thing that's important, once again, Lisa, I mean, I only answered half your question. I think what ASCII has done for us is it's put in that stamp of excellence, that stamp of approval on what we do as an organization. You know, we definitely see ourselves as a smart supply chain solution. We don't see ourselves as an NGO. But it's put that stamp of approval on us, and larger people in the supply chain are taking us very serious. So it's really opened incredible doors for us. And I think without giving away, we're going to go deeper with data, build stronger relationships. If I look at sustainability and how many of our supply chain companies are part of global companies, then there's a lot of reporting that needs to be done. So for us, it's really about going deeper with data, building those stronger relationships, and also listening, really understand what our donors and other people in the supply chain need from us as a service.
100%, and that's like key critical. Are they, shall we just pause a second and see if there's any questions from the floor? Does anyone have a question? Look, you can just put your hands up, or you can drop something in the chat. Yeah, while everyone is debating questions, Gary, from your side, how would you encourage future entrants to enter the awards in terms of what are the key things that are critical in terms of having a successful entry for the ASCII Awards?
You know, that's a tough one for me because, I mean, first of all, as judges, we generally come from different backgrounds within the supply chain. So I come out of an operations and sort of management. I always look at it from a business perspective rather than a pure supply chain thing. How successful was this? What did it achieve? That I'm driven by culture as the winning sort of philosophy for any organization. So how was it led? So those things fascinate me personally. But the judges, we've got Kathy Bell. I see Kathy's on here. Hi, Kathy. Kathy comes out of it from a financing perspective, from a banking perspective. Mike Johnson has got a solid transportation background. Leon comes out of it, he's at CA, he comes out of it looking at it from a financial perspective. Martin and Clayton are industrial engineers, so they're looking at it from that perspective. Dean is out of aviation, and he'll look at, and he's an MBA from Gibbs, so he'll looks at it for all of the fancy stuff. So we've got and Gavin Kelly from the RFA, you know, solid transportation and general management background. So we come at it differently. We've got, you know, people from the rail industry. So all in all, these judges are all scoring. They're all putting their mark on a piece of paper. And then after we've scored, so, you know, we take these scores, at the end of the day, we say, right, how do we rank them? And then we start to debate. As I say, that's a rigorous thing. But all of these elements, we urge people to look at the complexity of your supply chain. Don't be so narrow and single-minded on it. I mean, I can tell you in the past, and I was telling Ozzy this the other day, I personally was on an entry where somebody was entered a packaging entry. And it was about a CAD-CAM designed cardboard box about shipments coming in from Spain. And when we went and we sat and listened to them, and it was one of our new judges, Liesl Smith and myself, who were judging years ago, and we were looking at this and saying, we listened to their story, and their story was incredible. They had parts coming in from Brazil, parts coming in from Spain, parts coming in from England, from Germany, and all being consolidated coming in by different methods, air, sea, and then consolidated and manufactured and assembled in South Africa. The collaboration there was a key element for us. And so Ozzy's one here, you think of the different suppliers, the transporters, the actual communities themselves. There's a huge degree of collaboration. So look at your supply chain, the typical supply chain kind of metrics, collaboration, cooperation, results, efficiencies, environmental issues play an
100%, yeah.
increasingly important role. And I know it's difficult because when we don't ask people to disclose, financial stuff. Although we sign NDAs, we don't ask them that. As judges, when we're champion judges, we try and dig as deeply as we can to get to the back of, behind the entry. What is it really valid? What we don't want is a sales spiel. I can tell you that. So my big advice to anybody is don't give us a sales spiel. Give us, this is what it is. This is what it's about. Try and make it meaningful. Part of the problem is that the final presentation is a 20-minute session, maybe 30 minutes, Liesl. I think this last year
30 minutes.
How many? 20.
It's 30 minutes and then 15 minutes of question and answering.
So you've only got 13 minutes. Now you take something as complex as your supply chain with all these elements of how did it impact on your operation, how did it impact on your company's performance, how did it impact on your people, how did it impact on your customers? And customers are a critical role here. And what we often like is endorsements from your customers. And if a customer can participate as part of the team, that makes it even better, because there's no better endorsement that this is real. And so all of those elements kind of are things that make up generally a successful entry. We try to look behind the fact that not all people are great presenters. Some are extremely nervous. Ozzy's not one of them. But we try and look beyond that, forgive them that, try and make them feel comfortable, because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the merits of the entry. And we can only judge on what we see. We can't judge on what we don't see. So if you leave out critical issues, then, unfortunately, it'll make the entry less than it could be. And I think also try and make it as comprehensive. And as I say, look at your supply chain with issues down the line and up the line. In other words, what are the issues that are happening? What are the steps before this particular project? And what happened afterwards? And then the other thing that I haven't mentioned that is so important to us is the issue of sustainability of the entry. What we really are very nervous about is judging an entry and the business or the solution is going to collapse tomorrow or next year. So it's really important to us to be reassured that there's the future, that this entry has got legs. And one of the key issues that we always look at is, well, what next? Now you've done this great job, Ozzy, 100,000 people, what next? There's a whole bunch of issues that we look at, and that's why we allocate judges, what we call them champion judges, at least one, but we try to do two. Although with 65 entries we get really pushed, I must tell you, but to advise and to ask those questions and to see if they can be incorporated into the presentation, because we know what the other judges, we know that some of the judges are going to be pernickety about something. So if you can answer that, bring it out, put it into your presentation. It is, after all, a competition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got some really great questions here, Ozzy, put you in a bit of the hot seat here. So from internet, how do you identify the communities in need? Are you on mute, Oz? There we go.
Sorry, Liesl, internet. That's a really interesting question. What was very important for us, number one, was not to take on an organization if we cannot sustain supplying them. So what we did was, and also because we're building a bigger supply chain, it was very important for us to build relationships with what we call our CBOs, our community-based organizations, between them as well, so that you can create that ripple effect. So our process is that we'll start within a certain geolocated area with a organization, and then we'll encourage them to reach out and to see who else in their territories are doing similar work that can amplify what they do. And that is how we scale. if it's a new request for a certain area and we're not there yet, we will first go and look who are we working with in the area, who can help support them, because then you're building a supply chain. And even though food is extremely important for us for all the reasons, I mean, we understand as an organization, as a company, that we are already a conduit. We have the data, we have the relationships that can help with education, infrastructure, all sorts of other things by plugging a bigger ecosystem in. But it starts on the ground, and we've really focused and encouraged our organizations to reach out and to build a wider web around themselves.
I mean, especially those stats that you mentioned earlier. And many years ago, I used to work for an NGO that did feeding schemes, and then the stat was 1 million children in South Africa go hungry. I mean, I knew the number had increased, obviously, since COVID, but 3 million is a massive number for a basic things such as food, you know. There's a lot of questions around funding. So where does your funding come from for these operations? What is the quantum, and what are the main needs for SA Harvest to achieve their goals?
Look, I think for us, it's about scaling now. We've built a smart system, but it takes a dedicated team. We still have our own fleet. Not everything is done through reverse logistics. We need to have our warehouse operations, because a lot of times we have to collate the food, the ingredients, and make sure that we send out a balanced basket to organizational actually turn it into meals. So that costs rands and cents. And believe it or not, at the moment, we enable a meal for R1.20.
Sure.
That is how smart and, I mean, incredible help we've had from a bigger supply chain to make it as efficient as possible. But it does cost money to run SA Harvest on a monthly basis. We rely on a lot of corporates within our network that they allocate a sort of part of their CSI funding to us. And then they also, believe it or not, because we're not just in South Africa, we have managed to grow Australia, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Japan, and also New Zealand. There are expats. There's a huge expat community out there that still care about South Africa, care about our problems, that help fund us. But
Fantastic.
I mean, we're at a stage now where we got a scale, and that's gonna
require
take
funding.
some serious fundraising on our part. Yeah.
Fantastic. What role do partnerships play in reducing inefficiencies? I think we've spoken quite a lot around collaboration and the right kind of partnerships. What role do these play in reducing inefficiencies?
Well, if you think about just from a green point of view, I think organic matter is one of the biggest contributors to CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
You know, this is your game.
Yeah.
And if you think that we've rescued 94 million kilograms of food within the supply chain, every single donor, farmer, manufacturer, whatever, have contributed to those CO2 savings on emissions.
Yeah, so that's a massive reduce of waste, massive reduce in methane, and more importantly, feeding people, which there's a massive need for. So, I mean, that's exceptional.
And also, please don't forget the larger logistics companies, the actual supply chain. You know, these would have been, return necks would have been empty. So they are maximizing their own capacity. So, you know, we are reducing carbon just on that base as well.
So just to give the audience some clarity, often, you know, because I'm also part of the Road Freight Association, we'll get an email to say, hey, we have a load. Does anyone have an open leg that they can come in and assist? And that's really great because you're reducing dead kilometers, you're maximizing your load, and improving your emissions as well in the process, and then contributing to feeding, to the feeding. One of the other questions is, and it's quite a good question, how do you balance donor expectations with the operational realities and logistics? I think that is a good question, especially in Africa that defines resilience in that space. How do you guys balance it?
First of all, complete honesty. It's important that your donors understand and you communicate, you share data like, guys, this is our capabilities. Remember, you're part of a bigger value chain, a bigger ecosystem here that's actually making a real difference. So if there's a bottleneck, it's about communicating that also through tech as soon as possible, and lean into a problem.
Yeah. It's
Or a
often the
complaint.
problems that creates innovative solutions, and create, add to the operational excellence of your supply chain. Well, I find,
Absolutely, Diesel. I couldn't agree with you more. And once again, just looking at the people in this room, looking at the experience, looking at someone like the Road Freight with Gavin and the team, how long they've been going, there's so much knowledge around us that we can tap into if we're open to it.
100%. Gary, this question's for you, from Cassandra. What evidence, and I think you have touched on it, so maybe we just do like the top 2 things that spring to mind. What evidence made this more than a good story?
Yeah, I think first of all, there were metrics. There were metrics, there were objectives, there were performance statistics, there were deadlines, there was all of the numerical kind of things that one would look at. That was sort of straightforward evidence, if you like. There was also evidence beyond the pure stats of collaboration amongst things. We talked just now about partnerships. There was collaboration with organizations in terms of the funding. And the fact that it's grown is also evidence to an extent of the support that it has received. People don't continue to back failures. People will not back organizations that are wasteful. People will not put their money in. And of course, as Ozzy mentioned, I think one of the most interesting things that intrigued us was the reasonably unique way that they approached the funding and the sponsorship through the CSI kind of program. So it benefited the sponsors in a positive way. So again, there's evidence of support, there's evidence of results, there's evidence of growth. So I think it struck us right throughout the supply chain that there was sufficient evidence to, as Cassandra put it, to look at this as more than just a story. As I mentioned earlier, the one thing that really turns us off as a judging panel is a slick sales presentation that doesn't have any substance to it. It's all, and this was not an all form and no substance entry.
And I think one of the things, Oz, when we were prepping for the session, you were talking about how it's changed the conversation within the business, the language that you guys use. And I'd like you just to elaborate a little bit on that part of the discussion.
Look, I mean, once again, we've had incredible contributors to our success story. But for the team, when the acknowledgement was really important, because they have survived the riots. We've done relief work in the floods, which is outside our core business, but I mean, we did it because we have the relationships. And that is really important, Liesel. But I think for us, realizing that we're actually a smart solution to supply chain inefficiency, and that this is a solvable problem, we have presented it now as, guys, there is more than enough food in this country that still goes to landfill. This is a solvable logistics problem. It does need to be a collective, and that is what we're focusing on now. Building that ecosystem, and giving so many young marginalized people a fighting chance through a huge ecosystem of collaborators.
I think I mentioned this earlier, but collaboration and those kind of buzzwords get thrown around a lot in logistics, but you don't often see it in action. And I think your story really did highlight that you could never achieve what you've achieved without the collaboration and the communication and the hands-on getting involved in the networks. That was just key critical from the outset in terms of how you guys approach this. Are there any further questions from the audience before we move on into just some concluding comments? Yeah, I don't see any more. So,
Liesl, I wonder,
yeah.
Liesl, could I interrupt and wonder if is Mike still online? I wonder if Mike would like to add anything. And then I see Kathy's online too as judges and give their pennies worth here. Mike, would you like to add anything? Gone for a comfort break, I guess. Yeah, Kathy?
Indeed, indeed. And thank you so much. This is, as you know, when Ozzy and the team did their first presentation, I mean, I was just absolutely just taken aback by the sheer scale and what they've done and what they've achieved, and the fact that you're quite right, it tugged at the heartstrings, but their operational excellence and expertise, you know, and their focus on doing the right thing. Oh my word, it just simply was over. So yes, thank you. It's amazing. Yeah, and you know, I'm always enthusiastic and might be too effusive. You might have had a more moderated response from young Mr. Johnston, but I'm just absolutely so impressed. I just think this is amazing, and yeah, it's just oh, it's so good. And Ozzy and the team, I'm just taken away. I think it's marvelous. And then again, to Liesl and the team from Askia to be able to offer this kind of a platform to demonstrate and to showcase. Wow, this is just great. So this is what Askia is about. It's celebrating what needs to be celebrated, and yeah, well done, and thank you for including me as an Askia judge. It's exceptional, and having deep insights. Oh, it's just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much, and you're an amazing judge. Mike, are you back? Are you there? Can you hear us?
No. Okay.
No.
Let's move on.
Ozzy, well, I think actually Gary, first, some concluding comments from you around the discussions today.
Yeah, so I mean, we've spoken a bit about the actual entry itself, quite a lot about the entry itself and why it was the winning entry of the night. And as I've mentioned, it was almost a no-brainer because it ticked all of the boxes without us having our sort of hearts in our hands about this is a really feel-good entry. And as I mentioned earlier on, you've got to be careful about those because they influence your judging in terms of the supply chain. So that was an added benefit, and we loved it. I think, and I've also elaborated a little bit on people wanting to enter in the future. And I mean, one of the things that we do at Askia, which I know from speaking to people that have entered from international companies that have entered supply chain awards overseas, the one thing that we do that they like is the allocation of champion judges to each entry. We like, if it's possible, it's not always possible because we're an Africa-wide award, is to go and have a look at the operation. And we do this on a number of those. Wherever we can, we like to do it. And we like to do the best we can as judges for the entry. We want everyone to be a winning entry. We kind of mentor, coach, kick, scream, badger, because we wanted to do well. And often what you find is that we build really strong relationships with the entrants because we've done the deep dive. The people on this podcast and people in the evening of the awards don't get the deep dive. They get the abridged version of it. We get the deep dive, and it's hard not to be personally involved with the actual entry. So, Ozzy, well done.
Thanks, Gary. Ozzy, road ahead for SA Harvest and some concluding comments from you.
Before I start with the road of SA Harvest, I just want to really acknowledge what you guys do. If I look at the Askia judges and the amount of expertise in this room, and this is not your day job, guys. You know, you go above and beyond to build something for the industry, and we're very lucky to be associated with this. It's incredibly humbling for us. And I can tell you now from an SA Harvest point of view, you've got ambassadors for life. Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you.
We believe in what you do. Ozzy. We really do. I look at Martin, I look at Gary, Lisa. We are still getting mentored by you guys. You know, if I get stuck, we find Martin, we have a real issue here, you know. Can you bring some smart people and just like help us brainstorm this? And it's never a problem. So you have got lifetime ambassadors from an SA Harvest point of view, and we will share this with, you know, our sister companies as well, because I do believe there's real legs for this thing to go even out of Africa to as well. For SA Harvest, you know, our secret sauce has always been our people, the community-based organizations that we serve, that we have made part of this value chain, and going really deep in data, but also scaling the ecosystem is a major focus for us. And hopefully by next year, we would have built something that we're proud enough that we can come and talk to you guys about our next entry.
That'll be fantastic.
And then, Lisa, just the last thing from me, for the people that are on this, that are considering entering, you have to enter. Guys, this ecosystem, this collective is unprecedented. There is so much knowledge there. You know, you're doing yourself a disservice by not being part of what is happening here. There's so much to learn, there's so much knowledge, and there are so many people on this call that are happy to part with knowledge and to build a much better, you know, systems for us.
Thank you, Ozzy. Thank you so much. And yeah, that really, I love that feedback, because Askia started straight after COVID with the whole intention of how do we give back to the industry? How do we support the industry? How do we uplift the industry? Because everyone had a hard knock during that time. And it was really important to share the stories with everybody, the real stories about what's going on and what's happening. So thank you so much for being so open and honest with us and sharing your story about SA Harvest. We are intending to host a lot more of these webinars with past winners as well, and some of the category winners of last year, because there are really such valuable stories that came out of it, that every time we go through these judging sessions just always blow us away, just even from the simplistic ones right through to the more complex supply chains. And if anyone has any queries or questions, please reach out to us, contact us. We're happy to help you with your entry process as well. And any questions that you may have had that weren't answered today, please also send us an email and we'll address those. So all in all, really excited. Our next event, our 2026 award ceremony is going to be in the 19th of August. Deadline end of April. We've got some phenomenal sponsors on board. We've got a new sponsor coming on board, Newland Properties, which we're really excited about, and we'll share more of that in due course. But this is year 5. We've got a lot to celebrate and really excited about the way forward. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Ozzy.
Thank you, Liesl. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
Thank you, listeners.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.